DicePouch.com. Premier custom dice bags for the tabletop gamer. Your inner geek wants out. Featured sponsor of Gamers Table.
Hello and welcome to Gamers Table, a discussion of tabletop role-playing games and other topics related to the gamer subculture. Be warned, this show may contain some explicit material that may not be suitable for all audiences.
Hello and welcome to Gamers Table. My name is Eric.
This is Mike.
This is Mark. This is Jason.
And I'm Sean.
That's like the quickest intro we've ever done.
We've got like half the people.
Hello.
Yeah, this episode we're going to talk about weapons.
We got an encyclopedia. We're doing one by one.
What we mean by this is that certain genres have weapons that are very iconic.
Yes.
Some games have weapons that are very iconic. So we're going to talk about those. We're going to talk about some of our favorite weapons to use in certain games, and some weapons that we're not so hip on or we don't really like that much. So to start this off, I kind of wanted to talk about our roots in gaming when we're talking about.
I want to throw it out there. Monofilament whip.
Just contain yourself, sir. No, what I'm saying is, back in the old days of D&D, I remember looking at the old first edition book and just marveling at some of these weapons because I had no clue what some of these things were. Who in the hell uses a Gui's arm?
Yeah, right.
And I was like, what in the hell is this? But the thing about first edition weaponry, which I kind of miss, and I think they did it in second edition, if I'm not mistaken, is you had a different damage code for small and medium creatures that you were fighting, and large creatures that you were fighting. And I wonder why they kind of went away from that. You know what I mean?
One last thing to keep track of.
I think they're just trying to simplify it.
Yeah, but like say, for instance, a halberd. A halberd versus a medium creature used a D10 damage, but against a large creature used a D12, and I always loved the D12. That's like one of my favorite dice. So that's one of the reasons why I always liked using a halberd, because it used the D12 for damage.
Yeah, I think the halberd's probably the only polearm that I've ever used in a campaign for a character.
I've never used a halberd.
Well, a lot of people
polearm
would want to use it anyway because what are the odds of you finding a magical one?
None. That's kind of my thing, man. Like,
you're going to find short swords and long swords.
You think of like the iconic story weapons, you never. Right. I think Dragon Slayer is the only one I could think of where the magic weapon was a spear,
a two-handed axe.
Yeah,
right. Whenever you think of fantasy, generally you think of the sword.
Sure.
But looking back at some of the old weaponry and things like that, and I think that in modern culture, the sword has replaced a lot of other weapons that were probably, in like popular culture. Oh, yeah. It has replaced a lot of probably more accurate weaponry. Let me give you an example. Just recently, I watched that movie Snow White and the Huntsman.
I thought it was a decent fantasy movie.
It was a decent fantasy movie, but in the very beginning of that, they show a cavalry charge into an army, and every one of those armored knights were brandishing swords.
Right. Yeah.
Not one of them had a lance.
Right, which is so atypical
and really dumb.
Yeah, because if you're charging in, you start with a lance.
Right.
You should.
And then you draw the sword after you hit
and that's something I did want to talk about is sometimes when you're playing in a game, the use of a lance, how often are you really going to be able to do it?
Well, if you're always in a dungeon crawl.
Well, not even just that.
Never.
I mean, how often do you get the chance to charge on a horse?
Yeah.
Not very often.
In a game.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's why I wanted to play that Knights game that we've been talking about.
Yeah, but even then, how often are you going to be on your horse?
You almost have to purposefully put yourself in that position.
Yeah.
I am always on my horse. I am always doing this, even when it's ridiculous.
Right.
I mean, we had a case one time where one of the players just stayed on his horse, even though it was a dungeon crawl.
That's retarded.
Well,
is that the one where Scott charged his horse right into the crevice?
Yes.
Isn't there a spell called Phantom Steed?
Yes.
Could you use Phantom Steed in a dungeon?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I would imagine that would depend on the height of the ceiling.
Well, but that means you would have to carry your lance everywhere you went.
Yeah, that's
what your squire's for.
And yes, another reason for NPCs.
And your portable hole.
Yeah, so you can pull
Well, get in that portable hole.
so you can pull out your 12-foot lance.
Well, you can also use a portable hole
I
for
mean, what is a
cover,
lance?
too.
12 foot?
Oh, it's not.
10?
I don't think it's quite 12 feet. Maybe. I don't know.
They're long.
They're varying lengths.
I think in the third edition of 3.5, they went so far as to have both heavy and light
I was
lances
like,
as well.
an 8-foot lance isn't going to be just barely past the nose of your horse. So
That's a good point.
you're going to be out there a good 4 feet past your horse. So you're looking at 12 feet.
and that might be the other pole arm.
So you're not going to carry a 12-foot pole through a cave.
That might be the other pole arm that I've used would be a long spear.
Long
'Cause I
spear.
think that's considered a pole
Yeah.
arm.
And then there's the all pike. I mean, those things were like 25 feet long.
Oh, yeah.
And
But those are used by footmen, though, to take
take out horse.
Yes. They were also used by the French revolutionaries to parade heads through the town.
That's an idea. That's something we could do.
What it boils down to is there's optimal weapons to use. And so in any game we play, there's going to be obvious choices, and then there's going to be cornball choices like pole arms in a dungeon.
Right.
Right.
Well, somebody said earlier, what are the odds you find a magical halberd? Well, the thing is, though, is if everybody uses a longsword and you find one magic longsword, everybody wants it.
Well, yeah, and then you start doing the treasure distribution rotation. I don't know. I guess I've gotten to the point now where D&D has gotten so specialized with character generation and things like that. Used to be your fighter was defined by the weapon that he carried.
Yeah.
Right.
He wasn't defined by his specialized feats or whatever character build you're using. It was whatever weaponry he had. I don't know. There are some like character builds, prestige classes where you can use pole arms or different weapons.
I think for me, as far as D&D goes, I think probably the weapon I've used the most would be the longsword, and I think most people would probably answer that way.
Mine's an axe.
Really.
I played dwarves.
Plays a lot of dwarves,
Yeah.
which
And I
Dwarves
always
with
carry
swords
axes.
just don't really make sense in my head, you know?
Yeah, I always had either a two-handed axe or just a war axe. Or
But I think my favorite weapon all time would be the bastard sword.
Yeah.
no, I think mine's
Yeah.
the
It's
axe.
for the versatility.
Right. You can put two hands on it.
but with third edition, you had to have a exotic weapon proficiency to
right.
use it.
It doesn't make any sense. First off, swords were not that common until you had the knighted class in Europe. And then at that point, a bastard sword would have been more common than what we would say is the one-handed longsword, which was been more common in Northern Europe, the Viking classes, where even then, again, not very common. They had axes that they used in combat. They used spears in combat. I mean,
It'd be more like
that was the run-of-the-mill foot soldier weapon.
Maces.
It'd be like
Well, it's because they're easy to construct.
They're easy to construct. Swords are very dicey. You've got to have them they got to bend the right amount as much. They got to be they can't be too rigid. It's metallurgy, basically.
So it's not that's a Hollywood thing that's romanticized.
Oh, yeah.
The possession of swords. Really, you probably wouldn't have been allowed to have a sword.
And that's why, like back in like old stories, they would say, this is my father's sword.
Oh, yeah.
You would inherit your sword from your father, from your grandfather, or something like that.
Right.
The Sword of Duquesne.
Exactly. The sword of Duquesne. Right.
The most common weapons would be weapons that would be for utilitarian purposes. A knife, obviously, a knife is the most basic tool that there is. Well, or maybe just a rock in your hand, I guess.
Well, yeah.
This is the most basic tool.
Of course,
sling.
you're not playing commoners all the time in D&D. Imagine trying to play L5R without katanas.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
That's the iconic sword for the game. I mean, if you're a samurai and you don't have a katana, you're not a samurai.
Nunchucks, baby.
I have recently listened to an interview with a guy who did some serious research into ninjas and ninjutsu. It's pretty damned interesting. Ninja stars, not a thing.
Really? Not at all?
No.
Is that a Hollywood thing?
Or is it more
Not
of a...
necessarily a Hollywood
Just
thing. but
stories.
It's a story thing, yeah.
Ah.
It's not something that was... They did have shuriken, that they were more like,
Throwing knives?
Throwing
nails.
needles,
Oh, wow.
yeah.
like little needles. Yeah,
That really bums me out. I always thought ninja stars were cool.
They are cool.
they are
Yeah.
cool.
It's something. It's something that you can, It's,
I knew someone that
Is it-
ordered some actual ninja stars when he got them. Couldn't wait to get them, and they were lame as hell. You after throwing them at wood and targets and thinking, and they stick in that really cool, but then you get to looking thinking you couldn't penetrate nobody
Yeah,
with
they're
these.
really impractical.
They're horrible.
I remember Jamie when we were kids making throwing knives out of butter knives.
Oh, yeah.
He'd grind them down.
He would grind them down.
the blades
no,
down.
really.
And they were really good throwing
almost
knives.
just like the ninja darts. I mean, that's what he made. He even had the little tassel off the back of them, so he'd throw them and they'd straighten themselves out.
Yeah.
They'd stab into those oak trees. But yeah, he was a little.
I think we're starting to get a little.
I used to make nunchucks out of copper tubing and bike chains.
Oh,
How did that
That's like
work?
Mad Max. It's like
My
post-apocalyptic.
parents wouldn't buy me any, so I made them.
we're getting into cyberpunk now.
You mean bike chains like on a
No, like what you used to lock up your bike.
Oh, okay. I was like, holy
that
cow.
I'm like, a chain?
No.
It would only bend one way.
Mad
No,
Max
'cause if you got the right
Thunderdome.
gauge copper tubing and like say it's like you had the cylindrical combination on that chain,
Right.
If that broke, it was like the perfect size to fit in the certain gauge copper tubing that I had. So I'd run the chain through the one end, and then it would just stick there, right? Then I'd have to work out some kind of device to affix the other end to the bottom of the other
I think,
piece of copper
I think
tubing.
Mark may have more troubles than Jamie did.
Yeah, I think so. Jamie actually had money and would get the real thing.
I liked weapons. I had hippie parents. So,
Yeah, so Jamie actually had real nunchucks and real stars.
yeah.
Talking about like say a post-apocalyptic, making fun of Mark saying that he's a Mad Max, weapon maker.
But I'd be a valuable person to have.
true.
Yeah, the zombie apocalypse.
Think about
You're on my team.
The impracticality of some of the weapons we see in some of these movies, like let's say the Road Warrior, the bladed
Boomerang.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long
things
as you
like,
got the gauntlet, you're all set.
but the things that you could use for weapons, because in a
In a
genre
world.
like post-apocalyptic, you almost can use modern weapons, but you could also kind of put a spin on maybe some Stone Age weapons and things like that. Using a motorcycle chain to whip somebody with.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
You could really
just a blade of a chainsaw blade. Heck, look how
chainsaw
damaging
blade,
that would
or
be.
the blade of a lawnmower.
Oh yeah, sling
You
blade.
need the blade of a lawnmower.
What you gonna do with that? I reckon I'm gonna kill him with it.
Jimbo's calling it a Kaiser blade. That's actually a really badass weapon. I love going to hardware stores and looking at the things that you could use. A bill hook, which is a bill hook was a pole arm, but it was actually a modified farmer's weapon or farmer's tool.
Okay.
You can buy a bill hook. I could go uptown right now to a hardware store. They have a bill hook that's on a.
I go to Walmart and buy a shotgun.
That's on a.
Let's see who wins.
Let's go.
One of us will require a background check. We are in Illinois.
Yes,
one of
this
us
is
won't.
true.
But you can get it it's on a 4-foot oak handle, and then it's got this wicked ass blade on it. That's blade on one side. It's hooked, and then it's bladed on the other side as well. And it's really cool. And it would be great for killing zombies.
Corn knife.
Okay.
Corn knife, yeah, that'd be great
awesome.
too. Sure.
Awesome blade. Hey, Bear Grylls has his own line of knives out now.
Bear Grylls is a pussy.
Yeah, but have you seen them blades?
Yeah, I know. I own a couple.
Are awesome. Enough said. Okay, Star Wars. No,
Yes.
Lightsaber.
Whoa.
Can't have Star Wars without a lightsaber.
that is the ultimate weapon.
It is.
Blaster.
But
Nah.
Hokey religions and ancient
a lightsaber versus a monofilament whip.
DL-44.
What's cutting what there?
The monofilament whip.
Huh?
The monofilament whip isn't just energy. There's a dingus there.
But there isn't nothing sharper.
Sure, it's called a lightsaber.
It's pure energy.
It's a lightsaber.
I think we talked about this. It's the plank. Remember the plank thin blade?
Yes.
It could shear atoms in half.
Is that a real thing?
No. Well, it is a measurement, yes, but it's
After Max Planck, the physicist.
No.
Oh,
I'm still thinking
he's
they.
my favorite physicist.
I think using what we were talking about. Lucas used that like old school mentality.
Mm-hmm.
This is my father's sword. This is your father's lightsaber.
Right.
Yep.
And that's
Well,
that's a very old way of thinking of. This is my father's sword. Or this is your father's sword.
Of course, didn't Anakin go through quite a few lightsabers?
Yeah, I think
In
so.
the prequels?
This is your father's sword that he eventually made that he actually managed to hang on for a while.
Right.
He actually lost this one too. I took it from him after I chopped off all his arms.
Didn't Luke eventually rebuild that one?
He built his own.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he constructed his own.
Which the Emperor says is much like your father's, but if you look at the props, it's actually a lot more like Obi-Wan's.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Interesting.
And green.
Yeah, I don't think handing down swords was a tradition in
Star Wars.
the Jedi
Yeah.
Order.
Right. But nothing is more iconic. Nothing says Star Wars like a lightsaber. Sure.
Right.
The only thing that I think would be more iconic would be Vader's breathing. You know,
Yeah.
you see a lightsaber, you go, "That's from Star Wars." You hear Vader breathing, "That's from Star Wars."
I don't know.
Wasn't the teaser trailer for Episode 3 just the sound of Vader breathing?
Yes.
I think a close third to that would be the sound of blaster fire, though.
Yeah.
You know,
But they use that in more than just Star Wars.
Which, interestingly enough, reading about the sound effects of Star Wars, I guess a braided metal cord,
Yeah.
It was a guy line.
and it would